It was July 14th, 2024, in China, when 24-year-old Pan Xiaoting sat down for what would tragically become her final mukbang livestream. Known for her jaw-dropping eating challenges, Pan had built a huge following online. Thousands of fans tuned in that day as she prepared to take on another record-breaking feat, consuming nearly 22 pounds of food, from fried chicken and seafood to chocolate cake piled high across her table. Pan's path to fame hadn't been easy. She started out as a waitress, struggling to get by. But everything changed when she discovered mukbang, a viral trend that began in South Korea, where creators livestreamed themselves eating large meals while chatting with viewers. What started as a fun hobby soon became her ticket to stardom. Pan's natural charm, friendly humor, and fearless appetite quickly won her thousands of fans. Within a year, she quit her job and became a full-time content creator. To keep her momentum, Pan invested heavily in her channel, renting a studio, buying professional lighting, and building a dedicated setup. The payoff was massive. Live stream donations and virtual gifts poured in, and her follower count exploded. But behind the smiles and success, her lifestyle was taking a dangerous toll. As her fame grew, so did the pressure to outdo herself. Her eating challenges became more extreme, sometimes lasting 10 hours or more, with meal portions that would overwhelm anyone. Her parents begged her to slow down, terrified for her health. They warned her that no amount of money or fame was worth her life, but Pan brushed off their concerns, insisting she knew her limits. In truth, her body had already been breaking down. She had been hospitalized several times for internal bleeding and digestive issues, yet she kept returning to the camera, driven by the demands of her audience and her determination to keep her numbers high. On the day of her final stream, everything seemed normal at first. She smiled at the camera, greeted her fans, and dove into her mountain of food. Comments flooded in, cheers, jokes, virtual gifts. But as the hours passed, something shifted. Her energy faded. Her breathing grew heavy and she began to slow down. Concerned viewers noticed and begged her to stop. Still, Pan pushed herself to continue, determined to finish the challenge. Then, midstream, she suddenly collapsed. The chat erupted in panic. Fans pleaded for someone to help her. Emergency responders were called, but by the time they arrived, it was too late. Pan was pronounced dead at the scene. The autopsy revealed the horrifying truth. Her stomach had ruptured from the massive quantity of food, causing internal bleeding and fatal complications. Medical experts later explained that eating such enormous amounts can dangerously expand the stomach, restrict blood flow, and strain the heart. Pan's death reignited a fierce debate over mukbang culture. Originally meant to bring comfort to lonely viewers, the trend has morphed into a competition of excess. Despite China's 2021 ban on binge-eating content under its anti-food waste law, many creators, including Pan, continued to stream extreme eating sessions, driven by profit and popularity. Her passing left fans devastated and questioning how such risky content continues to thrive online. Pan Xiaoting's story is a heartbreaking reminder of the hidden dangers behind viral fame. A young woman full of ambition and heart who lost her life chasing the approval of millions. Her death stands as a sobering warning of how far the pressure to entertain can push someone and how deadly that pursuit can become. Jacques Boxberger was the kind of man who made running look like poetry. Born in France in 1949, he was a celebrated middle-distance runner who represented his country in 4 Olympic Games. For decades, he lived in the rhythm of stadium cheers, record-breaking sprints, and the thrill of competition. After retiring from athletics, he traded running tracks for the open plains of Africa, not to chase medals this time, but to chase memories. In 2001, during a family safari in Kenya, that pursuit turned tragically fatal when an elephant, one of the most majestic creatures on Earth, turned into an unexpected force of destruction. The story sounds almost unreal, like something out of a wildlife documentary that takes a horrifying turn. Boxberger was filming elephants in the wild, mesmerized by their sheer presence. Elephants are often seen as gentle giants, intelligent and emotional animals that symbolize calm strength. But nature has its own rules, and sometimes it reminds us that wild animals, no matter how peaceful they appear, Boxberger are still wild. As Boxberger focused his camera, one elephant reportedly became agitated, perhaps feeling threatened or protective. In a sudden, violent shift from serenity to chaos, the elephant charged. Within seconds, it had lifted Boxberger with its trunk, slammed him to the ground, and trampled him to death before anyone could react. His wife and daughter, watching helplessly, were left in shock. Their dream vacation turned into a nightmare. For someone who had faced the pressure of Olympic finals, this was the last challenge anyone could imagine. The contrast was cruel. A man who had dedicated his life to discipline and control, undone by a creature whose power is purely instinctive. It was the kind of tragedy that shook both the sports world and the public, a reminder that no amount of fame or fitness can shield a person from nature's unpredictability. French newspapers mourned him as a national hero, gone too soon and in such an extraordinary way. Friends described him as a man full of energy, always eager to explore new horizons. That spirit, the same curiosity that led him across finish lines and continents, was what brought him to Kenya, and, heartbreakingly, what placed him too close to danger. What made the incident even more haunting was its irony. Boxberger had spent years studying the limits of human endurance, running until his lungs burned, muscles screamed, and crowds roared. Yet his final moments were beyond any contest, beyond any preparation. There is something deeply humbling about that. The idea that even someone who has conquered physical extremes can still be at the mercy of the natural world. His death was not the result of recklessness or foolishness, but of being in the wrong place at the wrong time, in front of a creature powerful enough to change the course of a life in an instant. In the aftermath, tributes poured in from athletes and fans alike. They remembered not the gruesome way he died, but the graceful way he lived. A man who ran with purpose and carried the quiet confidence of someone who loved the challenge more than the victory. His story now serves as both inspiration and caution, a reminder to admire the wild but never underestimate it. Nature, beautiful as it is, operates on instinct and not emotion, and sometimes the line between wonder and danger is thinner than we think. Jackie Boxberger's legacy endures, not just as a runner who represented France on the grandest stages, but as a symbol of how unpredictable life can be. His death in the African savannah remains one of those stories that feels surreal, a tragic meeting of human curiosity and natural might. In a way, he left this world doing what he loved, exploring, observing, and trying to capture life's beauty. But the wild, as he discovered in his final moments, has a beauty that does not always want to be captured. On the morning of June 2, 2022, 39-year-old Stephen Dirks reported for his shift at Caterpillar's foundry in Mapleton, Illinois. He had been on the job just 9 days, still learning the ropes at a facility that produces cast iron engine components for construction and mining equipment, diesel engines, and industrial machinery. The plant's melt floor was dominated by massive open pots of molten iron, each holding thousands of pounds of liquid metal heated to over 2,000 degrees, roughly twice the temperature of volcanic lava. The heat radiating from the pots was intense. Workers on the platform felt it immediately on their faces and arms as they moved across the floor. The metal glowed a deep orange, shimmering like liquid fire, and flowed with a mesmerizing yet deadly fluidity. For most, these conditions were routine, but every step near the edge carried a lethal risk. Stephen's task that morning was a standard one, taking a sample of the molten iron before it was poured into molds. He carried his tools onto the platform and approached the edge of one of the 11-foot deep pots. There were no guardrails or fall protection systems in place, a violation that would later be cited by OSHA. In the heat and focus of performing his job, Stephen slipped, falling into the molten iron. The fall was instantaneous. Co-workers could only watch as he was immediately incinerated by the extreme heat. At temperatures above 2000 degrees, survival was impossible even for a single second. The molten iron swallowed him completely, leaving no time to grab anything or attempt a rescue. Work on the foundry floor stopped immediately. First responders arrived within minutes, but there was nothing to save. The pot had to be left to cool before anyone could approach, a grim reminder of the power of the molten metal. In the aftermath, federal safety investigators from OSHA determined that the foundry routinely exposed employees to unprotected fall hazards, especially those working within just 4 feet of deep ceramic containers of molten iron. The agency concluded that if proper guardrails or restraint systems had been in place, Stephen's life might have been spared. Caterpillar was cited for one willful safety violation and fined $145,027. Stephen's death was not only a catastrophic accident, but a stark reminder of the dangers inherent in industrial work. The plant employs over 800 people, yet even a Fortune 500 company with vast resources failed to provide basic fall protection in one of the most hazardous areas of the foundry. Stephen Dirks left behind 3 children, a family forever changed by a tragedy that could have been prevented. His story serves as a chilling warning. In industrial settings, even a routine task performed in a moment of carelessness or oversight can turn instantly fatal. The molten iron he fell into was unforgiving, and the consequences of inadequate safety measures were irreversible. It was September 14, 2020, in Aba, a remote Tibetan region in China's Sichuan province, when what started as an ordinary livestream turned into something no one could have imagined. Lamu, a 30-year-old Tibetan video blogger, wasn't just another influencer. She was beloved. With over 780,000 followers on Douyin, China's version of TikTok, she had captured hearts across the country. Her videos were simple, yet deeply comforting. Cooking traditional meals, singing folk songs, wandering through mountain fields, always dressed in colorful Tibetan clothes, always smiling. She never wore makeup, she didn't need to. Her authenticity was her beauty, but behind that bright smile, there was a painful secret. Lamu had been living through years of abuse. Her husband, Tang, had been violent and controlling. After enduring it for far too long, she finally found the courage to leave him. In June 2020, she divorced him, hoping it would be the start of a peaceful new chapter. But Tang couldn't let go. He stalked her, threatened her, and begged her to come back. Lamu stood her ground, unaware that his obsession would soon turn deadly. On the morning of September 14th, she uploaded what would be her final video, singing a traditional Tibetan song. Later that day, she went live again, chatting cheerfully with her fans, like she always did. Then, suddenly, the stream went dark. Viewers didn't realize what was happening. The Tang had just burst into her home, carrying a bucket of gasoline. Off camera, but still on live, he doused Lamu with the fuel and set her on fire. What followed were the chilling sounds of chaos, her screams, her pain, echoing through thousands of screens. Her followers watched in horror, powerless to stop it. Neighbors rushed in, putting out the flames and calling for help. Lamu was rushed to the hospital with burns over 90% of her body. For 2 long weeks, she fought to survive, but on September 30th, she passed away. Her death sent shockwaves through China and far beyond. Fans flooded her Douyin page with grief and outrage. Donations poured in to help her family. And soon after, Tang was arrested, convicted, and sentenced to death for his brutal crime. But Lamu's story revealed something even bigger, the harsh reality of domestic violence in China. Even though domestic abuse was officially outlawed in 2016, the system still fails many victims. The law doesn't cover unmarried partners or same-sex couples. It often overlooks emotional and psychological abuse. And in many rural areas, violence is still brushed off as a private family matter. Reports say Lamu had even reached out to authorities before, asking for protection. But her pleas were ignored, dismissed as family issues. That indifference cost her her life. To make things worse, China introduced a 30-day cooling-off period for couples before a divorce can be finalized, meant to stop impulsive breakups. But for victims of abuse, it can mean another month trapped in danger. A 2013 national survey found that 1 in 4 married women in China has experienced domestic violence, a number likely even higher in rural regions like Aba. After Lamu's death, her Douyin page transformed into a digital memorial. Her old videos, once symbols of joy and tradition, became powerful reminders of resilience, loss, and the need for change. Some local governments have since promised reforms, including tracking known abusers, but activists say it's not nearly enough. Lamu's life was full of light, love, and courage. Her death was a tragedy, but also a turning point. Her story still echoes online, urging a simple truth: no one should ever have to suffer in silence. In the summer of 1994, Honolulu wasn't exactly expecting an elephant stampede through its streets, but that is exactly what happened when Tyke, a 20-year-old African elephant, decided she had enough of the circus life. Tyke was not just another animal in the show. She was the main act, a 4-ton star who had spent most of her life performing tricks for applause and peanuts. But years of training, constant travel, and endless performances had turned that star into a ticking time bomb. And on August 20th, during a circus performance at the Neil S. Bladel Center, the bomb finally went off. The crowd had gathered for an evening of acrobatics, laughter, and exotic animals, the usual family circus scene. But as Tyke entered the ring with her trainer, Alan Campbell, things took a sharp turn. Witnesses recalled her looking restless, even agitated, as if she sensed something was off. Within moments, chaos erupted. Tyke suddenly attacked Campbell, tossing him like a rag doll before fatally crushing him. The audience, frozen in disbelief, erupted into screams as another handler, Dallas Beckwith, rushed in to help, only to be severely injured himself. In a matter of seconds, the joyful circus turned into a scene of pure horror, with families running for their lives and children crying as Tyke broke free from the arena. What followed next could have been straight out of an action movie, if it were not so devastatingly real. Tyke charged through the streets of downtown Honolulu, her massive frame thundering down the pavement as cars swerved and bystanders scattered. Witnesses described her as confused, terrified, and unstoppable. Police cars surrounded her, sirens blaring, as the city tried to contain the mayhem. It took nearly 90 bullets to finally bring Tyke down after a 30-minute rampage that left a trail of chaos, blood, and heartbreak. The sight of her massive body collapsing onto the hot pavement marked one of the most haunting endings in the history of animal entertainment. The footage of the event spread quickly, first through local news, then across the world. People were horrified not just by the rampage, but by the realization of what drove it. Tyke's attack was not random. It was the result of years of suffering under harsh training methods, isolation, and unnatural captivity. Reports later revealed that she had shown aggression before, even injuring trainers in earlier performances, but those warnings were ignored in favor of profit and spectacle. Her death, caught on camera and replayed countless times, became a symbol of everything wrong with the use of wild animals for entertainment. In the aftermath, public outrage exploded. Protesters demanded justice for Tyke, arguing that her rampage was a desperate act of self-defense, a cry for freedom. Lawsuits followed, and animal rights groups like PETA and the Humane Society used the incident to push for bans on wild animal performances. Over time, their efforts began to pay off. Hawaii eventually became one of the first states to restrict the use of exotic animals in circuses, and many other countries soon followed suit. Tyke's story was later turned into the emotional documentary Tyke Elephant Outlaw, which reignited conversations about how humans treat the animals we claim to love. Today, Tyke's name still echoes through the animal rights movement, a tragic reminder of how even the most powerful creatures can be broken by human cruelty. Her story is not just about one elephant's rampage, it is about what happens when we forget that animals feel fear, pain, and anger too. In the end, Tyke did not die as a monster. She died as a victim of a world that caged her for entertainment. And though her rampage shook Honolulu to its core, it also sparked something bigger, a long overdue wake-up call that maybe, just maybe, the circus should leave the wild out of its spotlight. It started as just another morning shift at the Bumblebee Foods plant in Santa Fe Springs, California. On October 11, 2012, Jose Melena, a 62-year-old employee who'd worked there for years, clocked in before dawn. He knew the routine like the back of his hand. Load the carts with tuna, slide them into the industrial ovens, seal them tight, and let the massive pressure cookers do their job. These weren't ordinary ovens. Each one stretched over 30 feet long, capable of holding thousands of cans at once. When sealed, the chamber filled with superheated steam, climbing to around 270 to to cook the tuna perfectly. It was dangerous equipment, the kind of machinery that demanded strict safety measures and constant awareness. That morning, amid the noise of forklifts, rattling carts, and clanging metal, Jose stepped into the oven to check the carts he'd just loaded. Nobody saw him go in. On a busy floor with dozens of workers moving at once, his absence barely registered. A co-worker, assuming Jose had stepped away to the bathroom, closed the steel door, locked it, and started the cooking cycle. The oven sealed shut with a heavy clang. Steam began to pour through the pipes as the temperature climbed. Inside, Jose was trapped. Once the system was engaged, there was no manual release. It had to complete its full 2-hour cycle before it could be opened again. As the factory continued its routine, stacking pallets, running forklifts, and cycling ovens, no one realized Jose was missing. 2 hours later, when workers opened the oven expecting cooked tuna, they were met with a scene that would haunt them forever. Jose Milena had been inside the entire time. Deputy District Attorney Hoon Chun, a man who had prosecuted over 40 murder cases, later called it the worst circumstances of death I have ever witnessed. He added grimly, "If you had to choose a way to die, you'd rather be shot or stabbed than slowly cooked in an oven." The horrific tragedy sent shockwaves through California and drew the attention of state investigators and federal workplace safety officials. The California Division of Occupational Safety and Health concluded that Bumblebee Foods had failed to properly assess the dangers of working near those industrial ovens and lacked effective safety systems to prevent such a disaster. The company was initially fined $74,000, but that was only the beginning. Years later, after lengthy legal proceedings, Bumblebee Foods agreed to pay $6 million to settle criminal charges, the largest workplace death payout in California history. The settlement included $1.5 million directly to Milena's family, along with additional fines and a promise to overhaul factory safety nationwide. As part of the agreement, Bumblebee was required to upgrade its ovens so workers could never be trapped inside again and to implement new training programs focused on safety awareness. The company's plant operations director, Angel Rodriguez, and former safety manager Sol Flores were also charged. Flores, 42, pleaded guilty to a felony violation of workplace safety laws and received 3 years probation and nearly $19,000 in penalties. Rodriguez, 63, agreed to perform 320 hours of community service, take safety courses, and pay fines totaling around $11,000. In a public statement, Bumblebee said, "We will never forget the unfathomable loss of our colleague, Jose Milena, and we are committed to ensuring employee safety remains our top priority." But for those who knew Jose, no amount of money or corporate promises could erase what happened that morning. How an ordinary shift in a seafood plant turned into one of California's most horrifying industrial accidents, when a man was literally cooked to death in the same oven built to prepare tuna. It was May 16, 2024, in Suffolk, Virginia, a day that would end in unimaginable tragedy. 17-year-old Raleigh Freeman III, better known as Rio Huncho, was a rising rapper full of energy, ambition, and promise. With nearly 29,000 Instagram followers and a growing Spotify audience, he was starting to make his mark on the music scene. That evening, Rio decided to go live on Instagram from his home, just a casual stream to connect with fans. It was something he'd done plenty of times before, but this time, the live stream would take a devastating turn. During the broadcast, Rio picked up a handgun, something he'd shown off before in photos and videos to fit his rapper image. The gun had a green laser and flashlight attachment, and he handled it like a prop, joking and waving it around. At one point, he appeared to switch off the safety, pointed it toward his own head, made a bold remark, and pulled the trigger. A loud gunshot rang out. The phone dropped. The screen went black. Viewers were left frozen in disbelief. Some thought it was a prank or a dark performance stunt, but within minutes the truth came out. Rio had accidentally shot himself. Emergency responders arrived quickly and rushed him to the hospital, but it was too late. He was pronounced dead soon after. Police later confirmed the gunshot was accidental and self-inflicted. News of his death spread fast, devastating the local community and his growing fan base. Rio wasn't just an up-and-coming artist. He was a son, a student, and a friend. His mother, Monica Savage, who had raised him on her own, was shattered. In an emotional interview, she described the moment she found him and said she wished she could bring him back. Rio's cousin soon launched a GoFundMe to help cover funeral costs, sharing Monica's heartbreak and love for her only child. Support poured in from fans and strangers alike, showing just how many lives Rio had touched. At his high school, teachers and classmates mourned his loss. His teacher, Cara Dorsey, shared a heartfelt message encouraging students to honor Rio's memory by chasing their dreams. Days later, the community held a balloon release, bright colors rising into the sky, a tribute to a young life gone far too soon. His death also reignited a painful conversation about gun safety. Authorities began investigating how such a weapon ended up in his possession. Experts and community leaders stressed the importance of education, proper storage, and supervision, especially in homes with teenagers. A few simple safety steps, they said, can prevent tragedies like this. Rio's story became more than just a headline. It was a wake-up call about the dangers of treating firearms like props or symbols. Despite the tragedy, his music lives on. Songs like Money Getta and DOA showcase his raw talent, confidence, and drive. They're reminders of a young artist whose voice had only begun to be heard. Rio Huncho's life was full of potential, his future wide open. His accidental death stands as a heartbreaking reminder of how fragile life can be, and how one careless moment can change everything. In the glitzy neon jungle of Las Vegas, where tigers were as common on stage as Elvis impersonators, few names roared louder than Siegfried and Roy. These two German-born illusionists were the kings of the strip, dazzling audiences with a blend of magic mystery and majestic white tigers that looked like they stepped out of a snow globe. Their show wasn't just popular, it was legendary, pulling in millions of dollars and turning exotic animal acts into high art. That is until October 3rd, 2003, when one of their beloved stars decided it was time for a little unscripted drama. That night, the Mirage Hotel was packed with fans, eager to see the duo's signature mix of glam and growl. Roy Horn, ever the showman, strutted out with Matador, a 7-year-old white tiger who weighed as much as a small car and had a gaze that could make your soul tap out. The act was rolling smoothly, lights flashing, music pounding Vegas perfection. Then, out of nowhere, everything went sideways faster than you can say abracadabra. Matador suddenly clamped his jaws around Roy's neck and dragged him off stage like a chew toy. The audience, thinking it was all part of the show, applauded until they realized the magic trick didn't have a safe word. Chaos erupted as crew members rushed in, swinging fire extinguishers and shouting commands, while the tiger refused to let go. It was pure pandemonium, and the illusion of control shattered in an instant. Roy miraculously didn't die on the spot, but the damage was catastrophic. He suffered severe neck injuries, massive blood loss, and later a stroke that left him partially paralyzed and with lasting brain damage. His partner, Siegfried Fischbacher, was devastated. The show was shut down immediately, and Siegfried and Roy at the Mirage went from a Vegas institution to a tragic legend overnight. Roy spent months in recovery, defying medical odds just to talk and walk again. When he eventually appeared in public years later, he was still smiling because that's the kind of man who brings a tiger on stage and calls it love. Now you'd think being bitten by a 400-pound predator would make Roy furious, but nope, he defended Matador until the end. He insisted the tiger hadn't attacked him out of aggression, but had actually saved him after he suffered a stroke mid-performance. According to Roy, Matador sensed something was wrong and tried to drag him to safety like a furry paramedic. Animal behaviorists, however, weren't entirely buying that story. Some claimed the tiger reacted to confusion or an unintentional cue, while others thought it was simply a reminder that wild animals, no matter how trained, don't do scripts. Still, Still, Roy's love for his animals never wavered. He even continued to visit and care for Matador, who lived until 2014. The incident didn't just end one of Vegas's biggest acts, it also sparked global conversations about animal welfare, entertainment ethics, and the limits of human control. The Mirage eventually replaced its iconic Tiger show with Cirque du Soleil trading clause for contortionists. But even after the curtain fell, Siegfried and Roy remained inseparable. They lived quietly together in Las Vegas, surrounded by their beloved animals and memories of their once magical empire. Roy passed away in May 2020, not from a tiger's teeth, but from complications related to COVID-19. Siegfried followed a year later, closing the final act on one of showbiz's most extraordinary partnerships. Their story remains both enchanting and eerie, a reminder that when you dance with tigers, you're not just playing with magic, you're gambling with nature itself. And in Vegas, if the house always wins, sometimes the tiger does too. On the morning of February 27, 2013, 26-year-old Jorge Perez began his shift at Golden State Container, a packaging manufacturer in Los Angeles, California. The facility specialized in producing cardboard boxes and shipping materials, and its massive warehouse was dominated by towering industrial printing presses, enormous machines that stamped, cut, and printed designs onto large sheets of cardboard. Each press was a beast of metal in motion, as big as a truck, with heavy rollers and drums that pulled entire sheets of cardboard through at high speed. The air on the factory floor thundered with the constant pounding of machinery, the rhythmic hum of industry that workers had long since learned to tune out. Jorge was no stranger to the work. He had operated near these presses before. He understood their power, but like many who spend years around dangerous machines, the familiarity had dulled the fear. That morning, Jorge was assigned to one of the larger printing presses. It was running as usual, its rollers spinning non-stop, gripping and pressing cardboard with mechanical precision. Sometime during his shift, he stepped too close. In the blink of an eye, his clothing or hand must have caught in the moving rollers, and the machine pulled him in. The steady rhythm of the press suddenly changed. Nearby workers heard the difference immediately. A harsh grinding noise followed by shouts of panic. They turned to see Jorge trapped inside the machine. Co-workers rushed forward, slamming the emergency stop button, but the machine had already clamped down with immense force. Its rollers, designed to crush cardboard flat, now held Jorge's body in their grip. No one on the floor could free him. Within minutes, Los Angeles firefighters arrived and began the painstaking process of dismantling the printing press. The work was delicate and slow. They had to take the machine apart piece by piece to reach him without causing further harm. The rescue effort stretched on for nearly an hour as the crew used tools to pry apart the massive steel components. The factory floor, usually filled with the roar of machinery, was eerily silent. Workers stood at a distance, watching in disbelief as emergency crews fought to reach their co-worker. Some wept, others prayed, but everyone knew the truth. No one could survive what that machine had done. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, firefighters pulled Jorge free, but it was already too late. The rollers had crushed him beyond saving, and the coroner pronounced him dead at the scene. For those who worked alongside him, the shock was unbearable. One moment, Jorge had been performing a routine task, something he'd done countless times before, and the next, he was gone. The incident served as a brutal reminder of the hidden dangers of industrial machinery, where one moment of distraction or one missed precaution can mean the difference between life and death. In official reports, the tragedy was reduced to a few sterile words: employee caught in printing press and killed. But behind that line was the story of Jorge Perez, a young man in his 20s who went to work one morning and never made it home, crushed inside a machine built to shape cardboard, not a take-a-life. It was a warm summer evening in Guozhou, China, on July 20th, 2021. 23-year-old Xiao Qumei had just wrapped up another long shift at a construction site in Jiangxi province. Petite, confident, and always smiling, Xiao stood out in a job dominated by men. But what truly set her apart wasn't just her skill as a crane operator. It was how she shared her world from hundreds of feet in the air. Zhao had built a following of over 100,000 fans on Douyin, China's version of TikTok. Her videos showed life from the top of a construction crane. Breathtaking views, precise movements, and snippets of her daily routine. She often danced, sang, and spoke to her audience with warmth and humor, showing that women could thrive in tough, male-driven industries. To her followers, she wasn't just an influencer, she was an inspiration. That evening, as the sun began to set, Zhao decided to film one last video before heading home. Most of her co-workers had already left for the day. The construction site was quiet, except for the hum of distant machinery. Around 5:40 p.m., she set up her phone, smiled into the camera, and began to dance and chat like she always did, cheerful and full of life. Then, in a single moment, everything changed. The video suddenly shook. Metal beams rushed past the frame. A sharp scream pierced the air. It was Zhao's. She had fallen from her crane nearly 160 feet to the ground below. Emergency responders arrived quickly, but it was too late. Zhao was pronounced dead at the scene. Early reports suggested she had been filming when she fell, claiming she was distracted by her phone. But her family firmly denied it. They said she was always careful and professional, and that her phone stayed in her bag during work hours. According to them, she slipped while climbing down from the crane. A tragic accident, not a careless mistake. News of her death spread rapidly across social media. Her fans were devastated. Just hours earlier, they had seen her smiling and dancing. Now, they were mourning her loss. Some even reposted her final moments online, sparking outrage and debate over whether such footage should be shared at all. Her family, heartbroken, held a private funeral. Following local tradition, her ashes were placed under a small umbrella on a table. Simple, quiet, and deeply symbolic. Authorities in Jiangshan City confirmed the incident and launched an investigation into whether safety regulations had been followed. No additional details were released, but her death renewed conversations about the risks of high-altitude work and the pressures of performing for social media. Zhao's rise to fame came from her authenticity. She didn't chase trends or fake perfection. She showed the reality of hard labor, sweat, effort, and pride. Off camera, she was a devoted mother of 2 young children, balancing family life with a demanding job. Her content reminded viewers that every towering building depended on people like her, dedicated workers often overlooked by society. Even though her family insisted her death wasn't related to social media, many drew comparisons to other tragic influencer deaths, like that of Instagram star Sophia Chung, who fell while taking a selfie near a waterfall. Zhao Xiumei's story became a haunting reminder of how fragile life can be. Her radiant spirit and determination inspired thousands, and her loss left a void that words can't fill. To her followers, she'll always be remembered as the fearless crane operator who turned an ordinary job into something extraordinary. One smile, one video, one breathtaking view at a time. Jose Paquiri Rodriguez Ramirez wasn't just another Matador. He was Spain's golden boy of the bull ring, a living legend who could make a crowd hold its breath with one flick of his red cape. Born in 1948 in Barbate, Andalusia, Paquiri seemed destined for the arena from the start. He had that daring charm, that unmistakable confidence that only true toreros carried, and a reputation for keeping his cool even when facing a 1-ton snorting beast with nothing but a sword and sheer willpower. For years, he ruled the sands of Spain's most famous bull rings, turning each performance into something that felt less like sport and more like art, dangerous, bloody, beautiful art. But on September 26, 1984, in Pozo Blanco, that art turned deadly. The crowd had come for the thrill, the elegance, the spectacle of man versus bull. They got all of that, and the tragedy that would change bullfighting forever. That afternoon, Paquiri faced a bull named Avispado, a massive creature with muscle, fury, and no interest in showmanship. Everything seemed routine at first. The crowd roared, the music blared, and Paquiri danced with danger the way he always did, graceful, fearless, magnetic. But in the blink of an eye, the rhythm broke. Avispado charged unexpectedly, hooking its horn into Paquiri's thigh and tossing him brutally into the air. Gasps echoed across the arena as the bullfighter hit the ground, clutching his leg. He had been gored deeply. The horn had torn through his femoral artery, one of the body's major lifelines. Yet, even in that horrific moment, Paquiri stayed composed. As medics rushed to his side, witnesses recalled him calmly giving instructions, telling them what to do, how to stop the bleeding, as though he was more concerned with helping them help him than with his own pain. That is the kind of poise that made him legendary, and tragically, it would be the last anyone saw of his unmatched courage in the ring. The medical staff did what they could, but the facilities in Pozo Blanco were far from equipped for such a catastrophic injury. There was no proper trauma center, no vascular surgeon on standby, and precious minutes slipped away as they scrambled to move him. Despite the chaos, Paquiri remained conscious, even talking to the ambulance crew during the transfer. His strength was unreal, but nature was cruelly indifferent that day. He bled out before reaching a hospital, leaving Spain reeling from the loss. When news of his death broke, it felt like the nation had lost more than just a bullfighter. They had lost a symbol of bravery, elegance, and national pride. His funeral was broadcast on television, watched by millions who couldn't believe the man who once made bulls bow to his will was gone. His wife, the famous singer Isabel Pantoja, was heartbroken, and their son, Francisco José Rivera, would later follow in his father's footsteps, forever shadowed by his legacy. Paquiri's death wasn't just a tragedy, it became a turning point. The shock and public outrage pushed Spanish authorities to reform bullfighting safety standards, mandating that every bull ring must have a fully equipped emergency facility with surgeons capable of handling severe injuries. In a way, Paquiri's final fight saved future matadors' lives, turning his death into a catalyst for change. But beyond the reforms and tributes, his story remains one of unshakable composure in the face of death. A man who, even when fatally wounded, refused to surrender his dignity. Today, decades later, his name still carries a sense of awe. You cannot talk about bullfighting without mentioning Paquiri, the matador who defined courage, captivated a country, and met his fate doing exactly what he loved most. It is tragic, yes, but also profoundly human. A story of passion, peril, and the kind of heroism that does not fade with time. On the night of July 13, 2025, tragedy struck at the Tina's Burritos factory in Vernon, California, a facility known for mass-producing frozen burritos that stock grocery store freezers across the country. It was late, long after the day shift workers had gone home, and the sanitation crew was hard at work, cleaning and prepping the machinery for the next day's production run. Among them was a 19-year-old employee, a member of the overnight cleaning team. He'd only recently started working at the plant and had been assigned to sanitize one of the industrial meat grinders, sometimes referred to as a processing kettle, a massive steel machine roughly the size of a small car, equipped with powerful blades meant to grind meat and beans by the hundreds of pounds. Around 9:30 p.m., while cleaning the machine, something went horribly wrong. According to investigators, the grinder had not been completely powered down, a vital safety procedure known as lockout-tagout, which ensures machines cannot turn on during maintenance or cleaning. As the young worker leaned in to scrub the inside of the equipment, it suddenly roared to life. Within seconds, the routine hum of the factory turned into a scene of chaos. The worker's clothing became caught in the moving mechanism, pulling him forward before he had a chance to react. Co-workers nearby heard his screams for help and rushed to shut down the machine. They slammed the emergency stop button, but the grinder didn't halt in time. When Los Angeles County Fire Department paramedics and Vernon police officers arrived, the young man was already gone. He had been pulled completely into the machine and was pronounced dead at the scene. Authorities later described the tragedy as a fatal industrial mishap. In a statement to the press, Tina's Burritos confirmed the devastating incident. "We are heartbroken to confirm that a sanitation worker lost his life on Sunday night, July 13, 2025, while performing sanitation duties at our Vernon facility. He was cleaning an empty kettle that was being sanitized and prepped for the next day's production run. Despite the immediate response of co-workers and emergency personnel, he tragically passed away at the scene. The company added, "This is a devastating loss for everyone at Tina's. Our hearts are with his family, friends, and all who knew and worked alongside him. We are cooperating fully with local authorities and Cal OSHA in the ongoing investigation, and our focus remains on honoring his life, supporting those who are grieving, and maintaining the highest safety standards in our facility." Detectives with the Vernon Police Department and Cal OSHA began a joint investigation to determine how the accident occurred. They confirmed that no foul play was suspected, but emphasized that the machine had not been properly deactivated before cleaning began, a tragic oversight that proved fatal. For the young worker's family, the loss was unbearable. Their son, barely out of high school, had gone to work one summer night hoping to earn a living, and never came home. Co-workers described him as a quiet, hardworking teen who took pride in his job and was always willing to help others. His death left the entire plant shaken. One employee told reporters that his cries for help echoed through the factory, a sound they would never forget. In the end, official reports reduced the unimaginable to a single, cold line. Employee cleaning machine falls into grinder and is killed. Behind those sterile words was the story of a 19-year-old whose life ended in seconds. A young man consumed by a machine built to process food, not people. His death became a haunting reminder that in industrial settings, one missed safety step can mean the difference between life and death. It was January 27th, 2021, in the small Russian town of Smolin. The evening felt quiet and ordinary until around 6 p.m., when a familiar face appeared on a controversial YouTube channel called First Step. That face belonged to 60-year-old Yuri Dushechkin, affectionately known by viewers as Grandpa. Yuri wasn't new to the channel. Over time, he had become one of its regulars, a kind, gentle presence whose warmth stood out amid the usual chaos of the show. But sadly, that night would be the last time anyone saw him alive. The live stream that evening had about 150 people watching. Like always, it followed the channel's infamous formula: dangerous dares, reckless drinking, and viewers sending donations to push the participants even further. The higher the stakes, the more money rolled in. But this time, things went horribly wrong. During the stream, Yuri was encouraged by both the host and the viewers to drink huge amounts of vodka, reportedly around 1.5 liters. As the broadcast went on, his condition began to deteriorate. His speech slurred, his movements slowed, and then, suddenly, he collapsed. The camera kept rolling. For a while, Yuri's motionless body stayed on screen as viewers watched. Some people in the chat grew alarmed, urging someone to call for help. Others brushed it off, assuming it was part of the act. When emergency responders finally arrived at the apartment on Udarov Street, it was already too late. Yuri was gone. The man behind the channel was a 39-year-old who went by the online alias JEA. His streams had built a reputation for what's known in Russia as trash streaming. These kinds of broadcasts prey on vulnerable people, often those struggling with addiction, poverty, or homelessness, and pressure them into humiliating or dangerous acts in exchange for donations. The more shocking the content, the more money it generated. Yuri had become a recognizable figure in this disturbing online world. He wasn't just a guest anymore. He was part of the show's identity, and with that came the constant pressure to keep pushing the limits. That night, the chaos of the stream, loud music, shouting, drunken laughter, masked how serious the situation really was. Yuri wasn't just tipsy, he was dying, and thousands of people were watching it happen in real time. Even after he collapsed, the donations and comments kept coming. Some viewers begged for help to be called, while others continued treating it like entertainment. When paramedics finally reached him, it was over. Early reports suggested he died from alcohol poisoning. Authorities immediately launched an investigation to determine exactly what happened and who should be held accountable. The public reaction was swift. The Russian Regional Investigative Committee opened a criminal case, accusing the stream's organizers of negligence leading to death. Neighbors later revealed they had complained many times about the noise, parties, and drunken chaos coming from that apartment, but nothing had ever changed. Even Russian Senator Alexei Pushkov spoke out after the tragedy. He condemned trash streams as a dangerous and exploitative trend and called for stricter laws to prevent such incidents. Yuri's death sent shockwaves across the online community and exposed the darker side of internet entertainment, a world where human dignity is traded for likes, views, and money. This wasn't just one tragic mistake, it was a wake-up call. Critics demanded that platforms like YouTube take stronger action against harmful content and do more to protect vulnerable people from being exploited on camera. As the investigation continued, one thing became painfully clear. The online culture that allowed this to happen, where suffering is turned into a spectacle for profit, has to change before more lives are lost. Jean Batten was not just a pilot. She was a force of nature wrapped in silk scarves and determination. Born in 1909 in New Zealand, she grew up with her head quite literally in the clouds, not out of whimsy, but out of ambition. While most young women of her time were expected to follow predictable paths, Jean had her eyes set on the skies. Her mother, a fierce supporter of her dreams, encouraged her to take flight, figuratively and literally. And once Jean took to the air, she never looked back. By the 1930s, aviation was still an uncertain science and an even riskier career for anyone, let alone a woman. But Jean Batten was not one for limits. She trained hard, flew harder, and quickly made a name for herself as one of the boldest aviators of her era. Her solo flights between continents turned her into an international sensation. She broke record after record, flying from England to Australia and later from England to New Zealand, feats that were considered impossible at the time. The media adored her elegance and dubbed her the Garbo of the skies for her mysterious beauty and quiet confidence. Beneath that calm exterior, though, was a steely determination that pushed her to the edge of endurance. Each flight was a dance with danger. She battled storms, mechanical failures, exhaustion, and isolation in her tiny single-engine plane, often navigating by sheer instinct and grit. But every landing brought roaring applause and newspaper headlines. Jean became a symbol of courage and possibility, especially for women who dreamed of breaking boundaries. She did not just fly, she soared past every expectation society placed before her. Yet, for all her fame and accomplishment, Jean's later life took a quietly tragic turn. As the golden age of aviation faded and the world's attention shifted elsewhere, she gradually retreated from the public eye. The fearless pilot who once conquered skies became a reclusive figure, living in solitude on the island of Majorca in Spain. Her glamorous adventures were replaced by quiet days and fading memories of applause. Still proud and independent, she kept to herself, wary of modern medicine and reluctant to rely on anyone. In 1982, an incident that seemed minor at first would lead to her untimely end. While staying in a small town, she was bitten by a dog. It was not a dramatic wild animal attack or a daring accident, just an ordinary bite that most people would have brushed off. But Jean, true to her stubborn spirit, refused medical treatment and antibiotics. Infection slowly set in, leading to sepsis and a pulmonary abscess. The woman, who had survived countless life-threatening flights, succumbed quietly and painfully to a simple wound. Even more tragically, her death went unnoticed for years. She had no close family nearby, no journalists following her story, no admirers left to wonder where she had gone. Her body was not identified until 1987, 5 years later, when a journalist finally traced her mysterious disappearance. The revelation shocked the world, as the aviation icon who once conquered the skies had died in anonymity, far from the spotlight she once commanded. Jean Batten's story is a haunting reminder that greatness and fragility often share the same wings. She lived boldly, chased horizons few dared to reach, and proved that courage can defy gravity. Yet her quiet, lonely death showed that even legends can fade into silence. Still, her legacy remains unshaken. The girl from New Zealand who looked at the sky and decided to make it her home, forever immortalized as one of aviation's brightest and most tragic stars. On February 9, 2019, Daniel Hill, a 54-year-old worker from South Lyon, Michigan, began what should have been another ordinary shift at Michigan Seamless Tube, a steel manufacturing company known for producing heavy-duty metal tubing. That day, Daniel was assigned one of the plant's most dangerous tasks, checking the acid tanks, enormous open vats filled with boiling sulfuric acid, heated to around 160 degrees. The acid solution, maintained at a concentration of roughly 10 to 12%, was used to strip rust and impurities from steel tubes before they were processed further. Daniel was relatively new to this part of the job, and the task required him to walk across a narrow, elevated platform that ran above the tanks. The air was thick with a sharp, chemical mist that burned the eyes, nose, and throat. The metal grating beneath his boots was slick with condensation. Just after 12:20 p.m., something went terribly wrong. Daniel slipped and fell directly into one of the acid vats. Two of his co-workers immediately rushed to the scene, fighting through the fumes to pull him out of the scalding liquid. Within moments, they managed to drag him free, but the damage was already catastrophic. The acid had eaten through his clothing instantly, burning deep into his skin and muscle tissue. Witnesses later said it was one of the most horrifying things they had ever seen. Panicked workers dragged Daniel beneath an emergency safety shower, desperately trying to rinse away the acid as he screamed in unimaginable pain. But the chemical reaction was unstoppable. The acid had already soaked through much of his body, leaving his skin peeling and raw. Despite his agony, Daniel remained conscious as his co-workers tried to help him. When the South Lyon Fire Department arrived, they quickly transported him to the University of Michigan Hospital in Ann Arbor. According to Fire Chief Robert Vogel, Daniel endured some of the worst pain imaginable. Doctors did everything they could, but the acid had penetrated too deeply, burning through his skin, muscle, and tissue from the inside out. For nearly 11 excruciating hours, Daniel clung to life, suffering injuries that covered almost his entire body. At 11:30 that night, he finally succumbed to his wounds. Michigan Seamless Tube later released a statement expressing condolences. A valued Michigan Seamless Tube employee was involved in a serious industrial accident on Saturday afternoon. The employee was taken to the University of Michigan Hospital in Ann Arbor. He did not survive his injuries and passed away at the hospital. The company is conducting a comprehensive investigation and is cooperating fully with the Michigan Occupational Safety and Health Administration. Investigators from MIOSHA, the Michigan Occupational Safety and Health Administration, later confirmed that Daniel had been checking the acid's concentration when he fell. Their report, chilling in its simplicity, summarized the event in a single sterile line. Employee falls into tank of sulfuric acid and is killed. Months later, state regulators fined Michigan Seamless Tube $2,500 for safety violations. They found that the acid tanks lacked proper guardrails and anti-slip measures, and that workers were not adequately trained for the hazards of working around open vats of acid. Daniel Hill left behind a loving family, children and grandchildren, people whose lives were shattered by one tragic moment. His death was described as slow and agonizing, the result of a preventable accident in a workplace that underestimated its risks. It stands as a grim reminder that in industrial settings, even a single oversight can turn a routine task into a nightmare, and that every safety measure ignored can cost a life.